All right, take it away, Tricia. She's going to share a cheeky definition of
Yes,
bioregionalism.
well, cheeky definition of bioregionalism. And it was said about pornography by a Supreme Court justice. I don't know which one it was, but he said, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it. And that would be my definition of bioregionalism.
Well, that is definitely cheeky. Yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Need some of that. So I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm going to just to give you a little high level of what's going on here. I'm just gonna try to re-invoke what we were talking about on Wednesday with mapping and the reason why it is we're mapping, and sort of, creating this space that we can map from. And we've got some interesting ideas that we're going to share, and then we're going to jump into like an improvisational mapping exercise around the Osa. And this is really, I see this as a practice that we're just getting going. We might be fumbling through a bit of it, but I think it'll be fun anyway. We'll make it fun. So I'm going to share my screen to get this thing going. A ton of tabs. Okay, so here we are with the title and the image from the event from Wednesday. And it was bringing mapping to life to transform what is possible. And the purpose and the inquiry of that was, how can a mapping process create the scaffolding for and inject energy into forming a local dialogue about our bioregions, and or while weaving bioregional relationships? So that's really the question that we're asking. And I also assigned a sort of optional homework, if you will, for lack of a better way of putting it. And that is to just meet up with a friend, with a family member, and pull out some maps and talk about your bioregion and learn from the maps and see what the maps inspire, where your curiosity takes you, all with the intention of beginning to form a bioregional dialogue between you and your friend, your family, and to weave relationships, invite more people into that is the eventual idea. But this is just a way to get us started. And today what we're going to do is we're going to kind of model that and experiment with that, explore that, with Tricia and the Osa being the focus. And so another thing that came up this week that was really interesting that I wanted to share as part of the context building for today. As you can see on the left, we've got the process I've been mentioning where we're coming together to form bioregional dialogue and awareness while weaving relationships, bioregional relationships. I'm going to say that a couple more times. And as we've been sort of reflecting on the common land model and landscape partnerships, the way that they define them, and thousand landscapes, and how we want to see them from the Earth Regenerators as more of a bottom-up organism forming. There's just been like some really interesting conversations going on, and so I want to try to bring this potential into our thoughts today, into the process today, of can this bioregional mapping process be the scaffolding for landscape partnerships to form in all of our bioregions? Spaces of belonging as well is another term, and I'm going to just really quickly review what landscape partnerships are, in order to bring more clarity and coherence to that inquiry. So I first saw the name landscape partnerships in Common Lands model for integrated landscape management. As you see here, the first process element is establishing a landscape partnership. And basically what they are is they're multi-stakeholder platforms that are formed on, as Common Land calls them, landscapes or bioregions, that hold the process for regeneration of entire territories. Like we're talking territorial scales here. And they're formed and held over really long periods of time. That's an essential part of all of this, 20 plus years, generation plus, by core teams, which we've also had a workshop on and we'll continue to talk about as we move into the future. And then I also discovered that 1,000 Landscapes for 1 billion people talks about landscape partnerships a lot. It's central to what they do. They're trying to bring together 1,000 landscapes, and they call all of them landscape partnerships, no matter what form they take. And in talking with a guy named Tom from like 1,000 landscapes. I sort of was able to sense, at least this was my experience, that they see it a little bit differently than we might. And they are looking at these landscape partnerships as multi-stakeholder platforms, but I started to notice that there were a lot of institutions and bigger initiatives involved. It didn't seem quite as organic, I guess, I suppose, bottom up, multi-stakeholders amongst just people. And so, yeah, that got me thinking about, what's the alternative? What's the more bottom up perspective or approach? And of course, there's Spaces of Belonging, which is an initiative that is led by the Four Returns Labs, which is part of Common Land. And as you can see, we've got Theory U here, which is the grassroots counterpart, I suppose, to the 5 process elements that I introduced before. And as you can see, again, landscape partnerships are the step 1, co-initiating, creating a common intent, creating that platform, creating that common identity. And so that just got me thinking, like, does Earth Regenerators or BC develop our own interpretation of landscape partnerships? And Tricia asked me a couple days ago to share with her some information about them. And that was inspiration actually for all of this. And I just wrote this quick definition: any organically forming group of people on the ground who are bringing a bioregional dialogue to life while weaving bioregional relationships. That same pattern, those same 2 elements keep coming up. And so the inquiry that I'm sitting with today, and that I'm inviting you all into with me, that hopefully we'll learn a bit more about through the activities, the mapping activities that we get into, is, can we develop mapping processes and structures that serve as the scaffolding or the seeds for an ERBC version of landscape partnerships to form? Can we develop this into a community practice? And how can we develop this into a way for all of us to share in the journey of each bioregional learning to see itself? And so this is the last slide. This is the proposal for today's activity. Very light structure. Really, the only structure really is the first 2 steps. It begins with a land acknowledgement, and the point of that would be to invoke, see, animate the whole landscape, invite in whole system collaboration, whole system thinking. This reminds us of why we're mapping in the first place, which is important so that maps don't begin to use us, we use maps. And I read Paula's post on Refi Barichar this morning, and she was talking about how they did a workshop on emergent design. And the only way to do without knowing how to do is to first give an identity to the group, which I think is the function, the purpose of beginning these mapping exercises with a land acknowledgement. Since we don't know how to do this, we're really just exploring here. But at the very least, if we've got the landscape in mind, that can be our guardrails, that can be our direction, that can be our North Star. And then, so today, Tricia's going to give us a land acknowledgement. And then after that, we're going to come up with some agreement on what to map, where to start. And then that will provide us some structure for the dialogue and exploration. Then we're going to explore and improvise. I'm really glad Ben's here. He's got a lot of experience with mapping. But love to hear ideas from anybody and everybody in terms of, where to go as we move along. And like I said, this is going to be, I see this as just the beginning of a sort of practice, and it won't end here. So if we fumble a little bit, we'll bring some lessons forward. And I guess at that, I'll just pause for questions. If anybody needs a little clarity in terms of what we're doing, or if there's anything else coming up for you, and then I'll hand it off to Tricia. And I'm also going to post the agenda document in the chat right now too. So there it is. So it looks like we are good. Oh, Claire.
And Tricia may actually may actually be covering some of this. So, but it does occur to me, so I'm just going to put it there, is that when we are it's not just we're not just mapping, is kind of like figuring out these places or these points that we can map, like they're A to B's, or they're sort of these actual nouns. And I was just thinking, so I thought of an actual example. And one is just thinking about like composting toilets or building a natural building, if you can't actually implement those things, because then you're not allowed to do that in most municipalities and most jurisdictions. It's not actually legalized to be able to do that, most cities. Or natural building, if you can't actually iterate, so, and live in and discover where what works, what doesn't work, and then be able to learn and sort of improve it along the way. It's just theory. And actually, like, it's in the doing, it's in the living, it's in the interaction of the relationships, and how that, you know, people might have the most horrible reaction to composting toilets. Well, that's going to shut it down. Like, there's just all these things. So you can map stuff, but actually, and so the other part of that was, and I guess it's just pertinent to what I brought up before, was if the jurisdiction, so if it's prohibited right now, so what Brandy did with Brandy Gallagher and the Eco Village, they worked really hard to be able to challenge the bylaws so that they could iterate what they were doing, so that they could actually test out what was important to them, because they saw that as important. Anyway, I just wanted to sort of say that, to me, brings up like the whole piece about mapping, and it's in the living part that really the learning happens. So yeah, Ben.
Yeah, I'll just say real quickly, and I think it's something to come back to later when there's time, but for me, a real key recognition here is my understanding of bioregion is a balance or synergy between the ecological or physical and the cultural. And the cultural stuff is mostly non-existent or has been wiped out in many cases. And so at this point, like thinking about mapping bioregions with a cultural awareness, we just have to leave a big blank spot and really start to think and dream and speak into what could emerge there over time. But it is really a long-term and emergent process to really build the culture that will fill in and create, you know, a real thriving bioregion, I think. So I just want to kind of, or in my approach to mapping bioregions, is to keep a big blank spot on the map for what that actual cultural layer will look like in the future. And we can't really project too clearly from this point.
If I could just add one thing really briefly that Joe shared with me that's been really helpful in framing this is, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't exactly remember the words, but in essence, it was in order to bring maps really to life, it's helpful to see ourselves as the maps mapping ourselves. And if we really live into that, then that iteration becomes just part of the process. So yeah, I really loved when you said that. That's helped my framing. So glad to be able to share it, but agree with both of you. Yeah, thank you for that additional context setting. That was useful, helpful. Tricia, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Benji. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna do a screen share. Hopefully, no, that one. Okay, you guys all seeing that?
I am not seeing anything yet, and you actually froze, sadly.
Okay, so, how do I share that? So it's a photo in my photos in my camera.
It might be a bandwidth thing, Tricia. Maybe if you start by stopping your camera, turning off your camera. Sadly.
Okay, and
then screen share.
Screen share. Start broadcast. Oh, that's probably what I have to do, right? Start broadcast.
Yep.
Okay.
We can see your screen. You're sharing your screen.
Right on. Okay, let's find this then. Let's hear this. Great. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So You're actually welcome to view that as we do our land acknowledgement, or you're also welcome to close your eyes. Either works. But whichever way you're deciding to view, I actually want to start by inviting you to view just a vast, vast body of water. Just everywhere around, beyond the horizon. It's just water, a deep sea. It's relatively static on the surface. There's some movement, but it's relatively static. But underneath the surface, there's deep movement. There's tectonic plates that are moving. They're moving from the North American continent, south, and they're moving from the South American continent, north. And they're moving from the tectonic plate of Cocos Island, east. And out of that movement, out of that shifting, there is a movement towards union. And as they collide in this union, and as the volcanoes underneath continue to erupt, a landmass, an isthmus is formed. On that isthmus, on the southwest corner, emerges its crown jewel, the Osa Peninsula. And this peninsula, it nestles a bay, a gulf. This gulf is one of 3 fjords in the world, but it's twice as large and deeper than any of the others, reaching in some places to 700 feet. And because of its unique nature, it becomes a sanctuary. It's a place that is supporting at least 1,028 species. It's a place, the only known place on this earth, where the humpback whales from the Northern Hemisphere and the humpback whales from the Southern Hemisphere come to birth their calves. It is the home to resident bottlenose dolphins, spinner dolphins, and spotted dolphins. It's home to whale sharks, hammerhead sharks, 4 species of sea turtles, including the critically endangered hammerhead hawkbill sea turtles. And it's also home to an endemic yellow sea snake. This gulf, the Gulf of Dulce, the Sweet Gulf, is fed by floodplains. It's fed by swamps, mangroves, rivers, and lagoons that crisscross the landscape. And as we come to the land, we look at what this collision of 2 continents has made possible. Here, we find 762 species of mollusks, 69 species of amphibians. These interact with the water and the land. And then we move further into the land, and we find 237 species of fungi. These fungi serve a critical purpose because with so much biomass, it is these fungi, these things that are barely visible, that help to break it down, that help to form the fertility of what is living on its surface. And what is living on its surface are 115 species of reptiles. There's 8,000 species of insects. And when we come up, When we come up off of that ground level, when we see above that, we find 5,000 species of vascular plants and more than 700 species of trees. Some of these trees are up to 80 meters in height and 3 meters in diameter. This plant life, in addition to providing nurturants to the species noted before, they provide the life force energy for 124 species of mammals, 38 species of lichen, and to the winged ones, of which there are more than 375 species. So as we're up here in this aerial view, we can begin to comprehend how we can have 13 ecosystems and 2.5% of the Earth's biodiversity living on 0.0000085% of the Earth's total surface area. So that gives you a landscape view, an overall view. But, you know, as Benji was inviting me to do this land acknowledgement, what really came to me is acknowledging where I am right now. And I want to introduce you to two trees. The place I'm at right now is called Cooperativa Los Higuerones. And everybody was like, what is that name? Nobody knows how to pronounce it. What does it mean? But that name asked for itself because it's an honoring of these two trees.
Tricia, do you want to start sharing your camera again?
Did I not?
Were you trying to share? No, it turned off at some point in time. Mm-hmm.
Okay, how do I do that? I would love to. Let me just see how.
While you're figuring that out, I feel like I want to say that was one of the more beautiful maps I've ever experienced.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. I got to start the broadcast again.
I don't actually think you have to start the broadcast. Before, when we were practicing this, you just showed me your camera and then you just flipped it.
Yeah, okay. Oh.
Because we don't need to see your screen anymore.
Thank you. Okay, let me stop the sharing. Oh, there I am. Talk about waterworks, Benji. It's just a water.
How fitting. The Osa is a pretty wet place, a lot of precipitation.
It's a pretty wet day. Okay. Yeah. So these are the two higueron trees. I consider them grandfathers. I mean, we don't have to genderize them, but I wound up doing that. And this, I consider the guardian of the space. He's right there at the entrance. He protects us. He stands guard. And he's not really inviting to kind of be in, to interact with intimately. But he's just magical to view, to be in relationship with. But this higueron tree, this is the one who's the teacher. He's the guide. He's inviting. He invites us to come up into him, to sit at his base, to climb into his branches, and to seek counsel. And these two trees have taught me so much. They are my landscape right here. They're amazing hosts. I can't even imagine how many species they host. But orchids, epithets, the iguanas love them. The toucans are always present up in. And they teach me about hospitality and about welcoming diversity. And these trees are beautiful too, because the way that their base structure works, let me see if I could show you, is that they grow their trunks actually from above, and they come down and they root into the ground, and they provide greater stability. Here's just one of the roots that's coming down towards the land, but you can see all of these trunks that form this incredible stability, because they are many, it's not just one. And an interesting thing about the species too is that they're all unique. While most trees and most species, they they have a flowering season, they have a shedding season. Each of these trees have a very specific time when they drop their seed or when they shed their leaves. So they remind us of the uniqueness that should be celebrated and that should be honored. And so as I was pondering this land acknowledgement today, today's Yom Kippur in the Jewish tradition. It's the Day of Atonement. And I love wordplay. At-one-ment, atonement. And so I sit here with these trees and I wonder, I took you through this journey of all these incredible species, they've all been mapped. There's been, I don't know how many millions of dollars that's been spent on determining that all these species live here. But how do we map this? How do we map this deeper connection? How do we map these relationships? How do we invite these trees, these teachers, to become our landscape partners? That's the inquiry that I'm holding today. I kind of took it off a little bit from what our scaffolding was, but I just started in the U school, in Theory U, and it's really teaching me, or affirming for me actually, the importance of allowing what's emerging to come forward. And so I wanted to do that here with this land acknowledgement. And then so I give great thanks for you, for bearing witness, for all of these beautiful species that I am so blessed, so honored to be surrounded by, and to these two Higadon trees. Thank you.
Thank you for that example, Tricia. That was great. I feel like I'm there. I feel like I really am a part of your relationship with your place in some sense as well now too, having walked through that with you. So thank you so much. What a beautiful example of a land acknowledgement. Yeah, I'm so curious what it would bring up for people who also live in the Osa, for others. The feelings that would draw out of them, the sense of whole that would create in them and the relationships that would be woven in them. Just one of the things that I'm curious about after having heard you share. And so from here, the idea, geez, after like such a moving land acknowledgement, it's hard to just move on to something else. But the idea that we came in with today was to then come to some agreement, I suppose, or some idea of something to map. Now that we've sort of homed ourselves into the Osa Peninsula, now that we've seen the whole, we have some sense of the whole system and some want to collaborate in service to it. What's most alive for you, Tricia? What are the things, what are the curiosities that are most alive for you in your place? What are the, as you look forward to wanting to increase or form a bioregional dialogue and form relationships, what's holding you back, or what do you want to see more clearly that you think would open up the road ahead?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess some of what's maybe holding me back is this issue around what we are acknowledging, right? What we are talking about. What is this commonality? I'm just going to move a little bit away because the skateboarders are out today. They've made the street out front their little skateboard park. So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, it's this interesting thing about, you know, how do we bring a different paradigm into our discussions so that those discussions actually move us into something that's different from what has been. And so I find myself with limited ability to sit with potential collaborators to bridge that chasm between how we look at our landscape and how we form a bioregional coalition that has this more than human world as represented in a seat of honor.
Do you think we could start just thinking about the bioregional mapping that we've done before, particularly with Paul Sergino, where we've looked at the ecological and the social cultural, and we've looked at the intersections between the two, and we've really focused on the intersection between the two as rich, fertile ground. And I'm just thinking about the two higuerones trees. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing them.
You see?
Bueno, mi acento está suficiente. And I'm just, you know, where can we start? Who are the people who see those trees the same way that you see those trees? And could that be like the kernel of something? Can that be the breadcrumb trail that we follow here for the next half hour? See where it takes us.
Yeah, we certainly could, and I can, you know, I'd be happy to lay out within. I don't have actually anything prepared on that because I had a little bit more of a different mapping thing that kind of came up for me around looking at photos from 3 years ago of our landscape, of our yard, and then looking at looking at it now in relation to those photos, but I can do kind of improvising into that if that's what we would prefer. I'm open.
Well, we just got the opportunity to bring in more collaboration from Meaty. So let's hear what Meaty thinks.
Well, I just have a question, which is, who or what is this process meant to serve? Because according to who or what it's meant to serve, the mapping process, it seems to me, will be very different. And so I'm filled with the question of who or what is this process meant to serve?
So the mapping process is meant to help to form a bioregional dialogue, a dialogue on the ground in the Osa, as well as weave relationships in the Osa. So it's a challenge, right? Because there's only one person in attendance here today that's from the Osa. And so despite the fact that we only have one person in attendance, I still think that we can explore the concept and practice together. But ultimately, it's for the bioregional dialogue on the ground and relationships on the ground to form. And then the other inquiry on top of that is, can that be a process that then births landscape partnerships, however we want to define those? Does that bring any more clarity, Meaty?
No. Not really.
Fair enough.
And the dilemma is that the who it's meant to serve is outside of this room, is largely outside of this Zoom room. So the only possible link we have in, if according to the framing that I'm hearing from you, is actually Tricia. It's like, unless we know the needs of the people on the ground that you're saying it's meant to serve, or the issues on the ground that it's meant to serve, then, you know, it's an academic exercise for me.
I think we all have our own bioregions that we're wanting to map as well. I think there's a lot that we can learn still. I think that we're so early that there's just nothing but potential and opportunity. That's how I'm seeing it. But
I agree, but you've just introduced something really interesting, which is that if you introduce the framing of each of the bioregions that we are in, then we could begin to have some kind of mapping dialogue about similarities and differences. And that would be a framing that I would personally feel able to commit to. But at the moment, I can't be of service because I don't know what I'm being of service to. If it's to say what are the similarities and differences that we can map, then I can begin to feel, oh yes, I can be of service here somehow. RJ, I see your hand up, but I think Claire also had hers up. I think
that RJ may want to respond to something that you said, Meaty. And if that's the case, maybe we can hear from him first before we go to Claire for continuity's sake. Yeah, RJ.
Yes, I'll try to make this short because this is a deep question. When I first saw Tricia and when I first saw representations of the Osa, I thought, with all that diversity that was there before man ever stepped on the scene, why the hell are we even there? Why don't we just go away? And then as I thought about that, because that was a very disturbing question, I thought, but we are there. We can't go away, not just there. Every place we are, we're affecting our own bioregion by how we see and interact in it. So I see the Osa as a perfect example of the extreme of biodiversity and what happens if we don't pay attention to it and what happens if we do. So that's how I learn with it. That's how it's framed for me. And that's why I see the similarities and the differences, and only speaking for myself. But that's very, very powerful when I think first do no harm, but we're already there. So we better figure out, if we believe in this, we better figure out how to be there and how to learn from each other.
Claire.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to go back and say I really appreciated what you brought in that Paula had shared about starting with the a sense of identity, or what and I just want to just say thank you so much for really taking the time to ground that acknowledgement. It's really given me a new take on why an like a land acknowledgement, which it's like, why are we doing this? And like, what is it that calls to our hearts that we just know this is what it's about? And it's a part of it. It's like it's a symbol of something you're speaking to. So that acknowledgement, but then, and then what Benji was saying about who are the others. So that sense of identity, if that is the thing that that is really critical to hold in place, like it can't be forgotten in all of the other stuff we do, then grounding it in that, but then finding who are the others that that can help hold that identity. And to me, that then becomes really useful, because, you know, none of us are islands. Like, we can love these things, but we're connected to all this other destruction that doesn't hold that identity. So who else is there that can help us hold that identity? And there is kind of a mapping that needs to happen with that, because we can't do it on our own. And then who are the others that are doing parts that are helpful to holding that identity? And I kind of see it as concentric circles moving out, but that at the center is who's like the identity part, and really and truly, that to me is held by the music, by the culture, by the practice, by the like what we, how we show the sacredness, like the ceremony as well. Anyway, I just and so sometimes starting with the, that's why I always go back to the arts. Like, if you can use the arts in service of that, it makes that whole piece of who would you ask to collaborate on a project that lifts that up, because that to me is a mapping exercise in itself, and then it helps to have the conversation that can spread it wider. So I just wanted to put that in there. And I see Jan.
Jan, did you have your hand up?
Well, I was wanting to respond to Midi's, who is it meant to serve? And I think it's meant to serve not a node of who or what, but the relationship in between. And I think that the question of starting, I really thought that was a brilliant question of, Tricia, your acknowledgement was beautiful, and coming around to the, you know, the context, the large, and then coming to those specific trees and your relationship with those trees. And so then going from the question that Benji asked is, who else holds this relationship in that way? I think it's the vitalness of that necessary connection that is what the bioregion is about. It's about the physical, the cultural, the relationalness of that, the honoring, the awesome, the awe of that relationship. That I think if we go from that outward, then who holds that? It becomes a place that we if we weave that, then we're weaving it from the place that we're really wanting to, that is so different than the siloed experience that Claire talked about in her check-in, where people, or where Tricia mentioned, like all these trees are mapped and mapped, but they're not mapped in the relationship. And it's that that has to be the center of the inquiry about who else. And so I think that what we're serving in this exercise is finding that who holds that relationship, or potentially does. That's where I would think it'd be great just to follow that, I think, and see where we go. And I think that'd be helpful. Thank you.
That was really helpful for me in terms of how I'm seeing this opportunity for us to explore the formation of landscape partnerships. It would make sense given our culture, how we've done things before, that they do. I mean, how organic is that? They're growing from these relationships and literally like, new shoots on a plant. They're growing in that way. It's not like we're bringing in institutions and inviting them into process and figuring out if we share the same identity and purpose and going through all of that rigmarole. So thank you, Jan. I just wanted to say, sorry to jump in front of you, Tricia. That was really helpful for me and how I'm seeing this. Tricia.
Yeah, thank you all for this feedback. I want to go back to what RJ was bringing up. What the hell are we doing here? But we're here, right? And we're affecting this place. The reason that so much emotion has come up for me around it is because we know what is here. And yet we have a marina that's about to come in. We have palm plantations that are poisoning the rivers and the gulfs every day. We have huge developments that are coming in that are just wiping out agricultural land or forests to bring in houses. We have, we just have this onslaught because of our current framework. And because we're talking about mapping, I want to talk about like, who is this to serve? It was really interesting, Benji, because I was like all set to go on this landscape partnership journey, and talk about the stewards that we're working with and the ambassadors and the donors and everything like that. But when you invited me to do that land acknowledgement, everything changed for me. I went on a journey and I wanted to bring this group on that journey. Because as we're sitting here in these rooms, talking about mapping, talking about, putting things, we have to have this context. We have to have this understanding that these things that are coming from here, if they are not joined right here and right here, then yes, what are they for? And so my question is the same. How do mapping is all the rage. How do we do mapping in such a way that we are actually bringing reverence into things? Because unless we as earth regenerators, unless we as people who want to be in communion with the land, really allow our hearts to be broken open and to put ourselves in service to the land, then we can map it all we want. I can't tell you in preparing for this presentation how many maps. Yeah, there's maps all over the place about the Osa. There's articles all over the place about the crown jewel that it is, all of that. That's how I was able to do that initial land acknowledgement. There is a disconnect that happens in our culture. There is a disconnect that happens in our regeneration culture. How do we bridge that disconnect? That's what I'm here seeking answers to. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Meaty.
Well, for me, listening to you again, Tricia, Pegs, what matters to me about this hour and something that we've spent together is the way in which Tricia broke open my heart with your presentation of the land acknowledgement and the recognition of how deeply, deeply you are related to this, I don't even want to name the numbers because the numbers start to obscure it almost, but this incredible diversity. And to me, the only mapping, therefore, that feels relevant coming out of what I'm hearing is something that can map the relationships between these species, this huge diversity, with each other and with the human intervention. Because it's very woolly. I can't quite see what I'm talking about, but I know there's something in this which is about if we could map the effect of the human species in relation to this diversity and its incredible destructive, extractive behavior, then I think we would be doing a service. At least it may not, it may be cast aside by those who don't want to see, but it's as though we have to map that which we don't want to recognize is somehow what I'm feeling. Benji, take me on.
Oh, I wouldn't dare.
No, I meant dialogue me on. I didn't mean to get into a fight.
I'll accept the challenge. I'm just kidding around anyway. That was actually really a great, that was like setting a frame really nicely for how I've begun to see mapping in this very broad sense. Like I don't see it as an academic exercise exclusively. I don't see it as drawing out these, pulling up these maps and poring over, abstractions. I see what we're doing today. This entire thing has been mapping to me. And so we've heard the land acknowledgement. We've heard the relationship that Tricia has to place. And we've heard a lot about like the stunning characteristics of the Osa. And we've felt into her relationship with smaller and smaller scales. And that's given me a picture, a sense of what exists already of the relationship. I mean, I see that as a map. And I think it's really useful for us to have that very broad definition of mapping because it allows us to move fluidly from these conversations about relationships into the more technological maps that we oftentimes think of. It can lead us into, in a fluid sense, cartography as it's traditionally thought of. I think that there's a continuum. I think that they're connected. And I think that if we can get rid of that separation, that's one of the tasks that we have in terms of removing all the many separations of the world. That's one of them. So I think we are mapping today. We don't have any like artifact to show other than this video and the conversation. But I think when we talk about us being the maps coming to life through us, and the mapping process being all about creating this dialogue and weaving relationships, that's what we're doing. How I see it anyway. And I don't know if I have this, I'm talking. It's hard to articulate this in some sense, but that's how I'm feeling into it. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any. Claire.
I would love to say that I often am really inarticulate about things that I'm passionate about. Like the way you shared what you did about the Hingaranas trees. Anyway, I think I turned to art because there were things I was trying to say and I realized I lost people. They just could not follow what I was trying to say. And so there was a way of trying to express some of it, and it's not in one piece, and it's like there's all these things that help to tell the story. And, you know, I started sort of thinking people would say, try and figure out an elevator pitch, try and figure out, but really and truly, I had to acknowledge that there was something to the fact that why was I continually missing speaking? Sometimes they weren't interested and didn't want to hear what I had to say. There's a lot to that. But sometimes they genuinely did want to know what I was trying to say, and I couldn't reach them. And so I think mapping is like this, it's like a tool to communicate and to find others. It's just that I think the map became the territory, and the map is not the territory. And I think you really brought that home. And I think we need to just continually remind ourselves that. But I think that this tool of being able to communicate and just kind of figure out, almost some of it is a strategic plan of who are the people we need to work with, because really we can't do this work on our own. Who are the people that we do need to share this with? Is how do we become effective in protecting what we care about most? So.
Yeah, and Ben, if I could just take like 20 seconds to respond to Claire before we hear from you. I'm very excited to hear from you. I think that it's going to be really interesting if we continue this practice, and we'll feel into how to do it. We won't have to articulate it. And I think oftentimes, I think with bioregionalism, it's really hard to articulate. And I think by experiencing it, if we were to be in Bari Char right now, I think we would have a much clearer sense of what it is without having to say anything. But Ben.
Yeah, a thought that's been coming up or coming clear for me to add here is to highlight maybe some additional dimensions to keep in mind as we're thinking, talking, doing mapping, which often almost unavoidably kind of gets collapsed back into this 2D space of, you know, drawing lines and dots on a piece of paper or similar, and particularly the dimension of time, to think about how we hold and represent and work with time as part of the map here and the part of the process, and really being able to keep that awareness in the background of something that's unfolding, a process that is changing continuously, and maps that are evolving, and also, I guess, the different scales of time to be aware of and thinking and working and speaking on, you know, so that what we may come up with in some of these exercises as being just a very fleeting blip on a much longer timeline, where, you know, the end results are maybe unrecognizable from what we could come up with now, but are somehow connected, and being able to start to draw those lines of how the map is changing over time, and how the landscape, and how, you know, we ourselves as participants, mappers, and visitors in those spaces are shifting through that dimension. So yeah, not too much more specific to say about that, other than, you know, keeping an awareness, as like I've been doing in a real tangible way with my work in this landscape over a relatively short time span with a lot of changes here, but also just like over the course of a day, looking at, you know, playing with like a time lapse sort of mind's eye view of what's shifting over some of these different timelines. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now, but keeping that dimension in mind as we're mapping, and being intentional with that, like actually sort of shaping, like bringing some intentionality to the trajectory through time of the map and the mapping process.
Well, you couldn't have said a better segue into, I wanted to, and I'll actually pass it back to Tricia first, because I was going to shift gears a little bit and talk about feedback, and what we've learned here today and where we can take this if we are being strategic and intentional about this being a practice that we develop together. I wanted to take just a few minutes with you all to get a sense of where we're at, what we're thinking, and how to move forward. And of course, we don't have enough time to stick with 6 minutes. We couldn't really effectively do that, but maybe we can touch on that. But first, I'd like to hear from Tricia.
Yeah, thank you all for all of this. Benji, I also want to thank you for bringing us to how what we've been doing today is a mapping, and acknowledge that and say yes, absolutely. I also got really energized by Mitty's provocation around seeing the destruction that we as one species have been able to wreak on a place. And I've been in communication with the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, which is this global alliance for the rights of nature. There's one country, Ecuador, who has put in the Constitution the rights of nature, but there's different places around the world who have incorporated this. And one of the proposals that came up that I thought was brilliant was, as we're moving into Puerto Jimenez becoming its own municipality, to see if we actually might be able to trigger bringing the rights of nature encoded into the municipal constitution or the municipal setup. And I think that there's something about looking at what we have allowed to happen to this place over the years and actually demonstrating that as a way of showing that unless we encode these rights, we have no chance of being able to create any protection. And so, yeah, I don't know how that's done, but it's just come up for me as a thing that, like, wow, that would be really worthy of mapping. And then I just also wanted to bring in that, there isn't a whole process that we're undergoing here on the ground as far as partnerships, as far as collaborating with others, as far as weaving, as far as bringing people together, as far as bringing together this vision of who are the direct collaborators, who are the collaborators that are in circles that are a little bit further out and further out. That has its own set of inspirations and challenges, but that is like deeply underway. I think one of the reasons that that this came into this space today also was just in a recognition of like what can be in service to a bioregion in a meeting like this that allows for the bioregion to walk away feeling like there's something there. And I feel as if, maybe being able to do that within just an hour and a half or an hour usually is just not enough. But I want to share with you that I am walking away from today's meeting with a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Yeah, I feel similarly. And I'll just close out really briefly, and then I'll pass it around the room. If anybody has prior engagements or has something they need to head off to, please feel free at the bottom of the hour. But I'll pass it around the room to just give like a one-word checkout so we can all kind of share how we're feeling. But I feel called to, I'm going to jump on a Miro board and I'm going to actually map out what I learned today, what I'm seeing today, the relationships, just as an exercise, as an experiment for, you know, how to carry this forward. And I'll share whatever I make, and then I'll also invite people to collaborate on the Miro board afterwards. So you can share, you can make additions or whatever, and that could be just a little exercise that we, see where it takes us. And and I'm be thinking a lot about where to take this practice in general from here. And so if anybody has any ideas, feedback, please reach out. Make it a public conversation by commenting in the comment thread below the posts that I'll make for this, and we'll see where this takes us. And so with that, I just we'll pass it around and just give a quick one word or a few word checkout. RJ, I'll start with you. And Megan, thanks for joining us today too. It's great to see you.
Just very brief, just a heartfelt, emergent thank you for this. It's a right start. And thank you, Tricia. Yes, thanks everybody. Jan?
Yeah, Tricia, that was just amazing. You were the right person at the right time to say and share the depth of connection. So yeah, heart broken open to be of service. And I'll pass it to Megan.
Thank you. No, thank you, everybody. I'm still feeling very new to the Earth Regenerators, but I found this conversation really, I like the word pregnant, like it's just so full of ideas and don't know what's going to be brought forth. So I'm looking forward to continuing it, seeing what happens. And I'll pass it to, I guess, Mitty.
Thank you, Megan. Well, my word is profound. Ben.
Yeah, I'd say on the way out here, feeling mobilized. It's nice to be able to sort of hop out into other regions virtually and other circles and spheres. And I'm about to hop across watersheds myself today to attend to some errands and adventures up in the Rogue Valley. And yeah, just appreciating the ability to spend the last few days, as I said at the beginning of the session, really immersed in this place, like this whole world of 40 acres for what it is, and really be very present here. And then, yeah, to get up and go elsewhere for a while. And so mobilized is my checkout note, I would say. How about Claire?
Yeah, everything everyone has said resonates, and I guess grounded in the land acknowledgement, it's given me a really new take. Thank you. Really, really, just so appreciative, Tricia and Benji, for being the catalyst. And has everyone gone? Benji, you haven't checked out yet.
I think Jan, right? Jan, did you go?
Jan did.
Oh, sorry. I must be out of it. I've gone as well. I'm feeling really grateful for you all. And yeah, great start. Really looking forward to seeing where this goes. Continuing the conversation. Yeah, appreciate y'all kicking it off with me and together. So feel free to unmute and say goodbye, and we'll see each other soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.